Hello. Thank you so much. It's festival time, NYC by Design Festival, and we welcome you to New York City's premier design event and growing presence on the design world stage. 2024 NYC by Design Festival is in its 12th year, with more than 200 events, tours, talks, and exhibitions all around town through the 5 boroughs. Now, day 3, we still have a design-packed week ahead of inspiration, provocation, education, and celebration. When we first conceived of our Keynote series, our goal was to put prestigious designers in conversation to discuss world issues and challenge them to consider how design can influence, change, or solve these challenges. And we undoubtedly face serious challenges worldwide. I'm Eileen Shaw, Executive Director of NYC by Design, and I was supposed to tell you that earlier on when I first came up here. So, hi, nice to see you. We are thrilled and grateful to be here at the iconic Guggenheim, a rare jewel of architecture and a beloved New York City landmark. And how fortuitous to be here only 3 days after the opening of the Jenny Holzer's Light Line exhibition, a must-see exhibition. I'm pleased to introduce Tina Vaz, Deputy Director of Communications at the Guggenheim Museum. Tina, please join us and tell us a bit about this exceptional piece by Jenny Holzer, which to me feels as if its words are hugging the building, or perhaps the building is hugging the words. Thank you, Tina. Come on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Vaz, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Guggenheim today. I want to extend a big thanks to Eileen and the NYC by Design team for their enthusiastic collaboration. We're so pleased to be able to participate in this year's festival. I also want to take a moment to thank my 2 colleagues, Mark McClary, Senior Director of Marketing, and Alex Barber, Director of Marketing, without whom this partnership would not have come to life. The distinctive architecture of the Guggenheim has long been a muse and a site of creative intervention for artists, designers, and thinkers. The Jenny Holzer exhibition is a perfect example of this, with a spiraling LED sign that ascends the rotunda to the museum's oculus. On display is the creative power of the written word in Holzer's vital and incisive voice. Starting in the 1970s with her New York City street posters and continuing through her recent light projections on landscapes and architecture, Holzer's practice has confronted the use and abuse of power and meditated on violence with empathy, courage, and even humor. She explores some of the most pressing issues of our time, from climate justice to women's rights, from corruption to war, and experiencing these works in community is essential to her vision. Holzer's messages, whether her own writing or that of others, can be provocative, but they also encourage reflection in a way that highlights the artist's ethic of care. Following the presentations, I invite you to take the elevator up to the rotunda floor and experience the show. You can also load up on some merch. Tonight, the museum is open until 8 p.m., and a special outdoor projection on the exterior of the building begins at sundown. Outside, Holzer's For the Guggenheim transforms the Frank Lloyd Wright exterior with projected poems by dozens of international poets across history whose words speak to conflict, exile, and the urgency of peace, prescient topics for our current moment. Thanks again for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from the speakers NYC by Design has welcomed to the museum this evening.
Tina, after being here and having this experience, you are not going to get rid of NYC by Design. So today's keynote is brought to us by the One Club, and we thank CEO Kevin Swanepoel. Inspired by Jenny Holzer and partnered with the One Club, we present Evocation by Design. Our first presenter is Pum Lefebure, co-founder and chief creative officer of Design Army in Washington, D.C. An award-winning creative director and savvy business leader, Pum has developed numerous international campaigns for high-profile clients such as Adobe, who had a keynote this week as well on Thursday, Morphe, Netflix, Nina Paper, the Ritz-Carlton, PepsiCo, Hong Kong Ballet, and the Smithsonian. Born in Thailand, she brings a global sensibility to American design, a creative point of view that draws from different cultures and resonates with diverse audiences. And Pum will be followed directly by our second presenter, Nick Law, Accenture Song's creative chairperson and lead of their creative strategic priority. He's one of the world's most innovative and versatile creative leaders who believes that all technology needs creativity to make it human, and all creativity needs technology to make it real. Nick's career in design, advertising, and digital media has spanned 30 years and 4 continents, working with the brightest and best across multiple creative disciplines. He has twice been named in the Creativity 50, a list of the world's most influential creative people. A native of Sydney, Australia, he now lives in Brooklyn. And he did not pick up a Brooklyn accent, and that's good. So without further ado, Pum, please come up and lead us forward, and we will begin.
Thank you, Eileen. It's really bright up here. I don't see you guys at all. How are you guys doing? Good? All right. My name is Pum Lefebure, pronouncing like Puma without an A. I'm a co-founder and chief creative officer of Design Army in Washington, D.C. So today our topic of discussion is design for impact and action. I was born and raised in Bangkok, Thailand, and since I was very young, I love everything that revolves around art. From drawing, painting, dancing, music, that's my thing. I was the art kid in school. I remember my favorite toy growing up was a set of 24 color pencils. And I love that. That's magic. My sister playing Barbie, so I was like, just give me color pencils. There's a magic of, the process of creating and making art on a piece of blank white paper, and that's what I do. And I always knew that when I grew up, I wanted to become an artist. Fast forward into my high school year, I saw this ad campaign for United Color of Benetton, and of course I was shocked to see all this image. I went to Catholic school all my life, and when I first saw the picture of the priest kissing a nun as a teenager, it was shocking. And then I saw a picture of 3 raw hearts, and it said white, black, and yellow. It was really powerful, and at the time I didn't speak English, so I asked my mom, what is this all about? And my mom explained to me, this is advertising. And it's all about, not someone selling the clothes or a model wearing fashion pieces, but it's more about the meaning of united colors, representing different people from all around the world. As young teenage girl, I was kind of rebellious, like, maybe I do this thing called design, and I have been followed this magazine called Color, which is a magazine about the people all around the world. Each issue, they're presenting interesting topic from AIDS crisis to poverty to climate change, and this is back in the 90s. Like, people don't talk about that quite yet, not like where we are today. But for the first time, I see the new visual language of graphic design by using bold typography, information graphic that easily digestible, and of course, controversial photography. And as a result, I decided to study graphic design in the United States, and this has a profound impact on me. A lifetime after graduate from graphic design school, I start my own agency, Design Army, and I have my own agency for about almost 20 years now. Of course, like everyone here, we are very, very busy with clients, right? And we work for the client, pushing the product, creating path for business for the client, make them very successful. But sometimes I wonder, is there anything better I can do as graphic designer? So for a very long time, we always make sure we have a balance between pay client project and pro bono project. And the reason is that, I want to have some control with the project that we take. And it's a way to get all my team to be psyched about something. We live on a phone now, and then every day you scroll down, you see so many different social problems that are going on, from climate change to poverty to inequality to, it can get so overwhelming, right? No wonder all of us feel very small and feel like we cannot make any change at all. How I try to separate myself and all this issue around that it's so quite overwhelming for me is to stick with something that I believe in. I'm a strong believer that art education is a great equalizer. So we always do something that has to do with kids' educations or art education that make a big difference in our community. Do you know that a lot of kids in the United States, they don't have access to music classes, no drawing class, no painting, or no school performance. And a lot of this public school, that serve low-income families in those areas in different cities, they don't have art education that equal to other part of the city. 74% of low-income 8th grader, and this is based on research. Sorry, I can't read the screen. 74% of low-income 8th grader who participate in art program from kindergarten through elementary school has a higher score in science and reading, and they are more than twice likely to graduate from college. So we all know that art education have a great impact, for society, but somehow when government has any budget cut, the first thing that they cut is always art and culture. My experience with Washington Ballet, which is a nonprofit organization, they were one of my first clients when we started Design Army. One year, the government started to cut their budget. 1/8 of their operating budget was completely going to be gone, and we talk about millions of dollars. We find out that the scholarship fund that the ballet is creating for kids to go to school or low-income housing student or low-income family who could not afford any art class, all those programs are going to be completely gone. So I had 3 options, as a young designer. What do I do? We have maybe 1, do nothing at all. The government eventually will put the money back, and next year, they'll be just fine. Or second, make a donation, write a check for year-end giving, $1,000, $2,000, do my part. Or use our talent and creativity and our influence to get a group of people, our creative community in Washington, D.C., to come together to help raise the money for the Washington Ballet Education Fund. So how did we begin? We came up with the idea of creating an 80-page book that celebrates the culture of Washington, D.C., and we just start with, show the sketch concept idea to the client, and then we know that this project is going to be big and we couldn't do it alone. So we have to convince the client for us to have access for all the dancers. We have to get the photographer on board, and then Kate Martin, who's a well-known photographer, really want to work with us on this project. So I was really happy about that. And of course, we're going to have to shoot this 4 weekends in a row because it's pro bono, none of us can take out work, so we need to get wardrobe stylist, fashion designer, costume designer, makeup, hair artist together to do a rotation every weekend to shoot this project. And also we need to pull the producer who can get permit for different part of the city. DC is such a difficult place to do any photo shoot due to security, but then we get a producer on board. And of course, I asked one of my clients, Nina Paper, to donate all the paper, and also one of our partner, Printer, to help donate the printing. If you have done book design before, producing 3,000 copy of 80-page book, it can cost a lot of money. So as a result, we were able to get all the team together. This is what you think when you think of Washington, D.C. U.S. Capitol, White House, Democrat and Republicans screaming at each other, the mall, right? This is what you think of Washington. But we want to change that. We want to change the way people view about our community. So this is the the key visual for Wonderland book. We shoot this campaign all around the city. Some is very iconic location like Pennsylvania Avenue, or some are less known location. Some people didn't even know that these places are existing around town. On top of that, we invite the student of the ballet to be part of this book, and their parent was so thrilled to be, for their kids to be photographed professionally. And what was fun about this is about creating the community of like-minded. We all kind of want to make sure we raise a lot of money, and we kind of pull all the designers together, from graphic designer, fashion designer, photographers, and so forth. So it was kind of fun project. This is one of my favorite pictures. These columns used to hold the U.S. Capitol dome, and when the U.S. Capitol went through all the renovation and built a new roof, these columns can no longer support the dome, so the city moved all the columns into National Arboretum. And people doesn't know this thing exists, so we did a scene of Romeo and Juliet there. As a result, we were able to raise 6 figures for book sales as well as the donors. 100% of the money that we received, we gave back to the Washington Ballet completely, and we were able to save some of those programs for needed kids, and continue to give the scholarship funds to the student. Like Roosevelt say, do what you can with what you have, wherever you are. Can design change cultures? Of course, design can change culture. Design has the ability to shape cultural identity, and that's the power of graphic design. The same artistic directors of Team Weber moved from Washington, D.C. to Hong Kong, and they have a different issue over there. People do not like ballet and this art form in Hong Kong for some reason, and I asked him why. He said people think Hong Kong ballet, or ballet, the art form, is only for the elite, that it's not for everyone. If you have money and if you are wealthy, you go see 4 hours of Swan Lakes. But then if you're not wealthy, it's not an art form for you. So I asked the client to send me all of the collateral material ad campaign that they have, and this is what they sent. Of course, obviously need complete redesign. Typography was all over the place. And the way they're portray dancer is so classic and traditional and old-fashioned in a way. They always pair boys and girls together, and girls is always being rescued by the prince. It's so old-fashioned, and no wonder the subscription is going down and down and down and down. No one wants to go see this thing. So we thought, okay, we have to change and make ballet hip and cool and young, if we even gonna make it for the rebrand, right? So 3 things we need to fix. 1, we need to make ballet accessible for everybody. Second, we need to create consistency through designs, the use of color, the use of photography. It can't be 10 photographers shooting 10 different shows. And lastly, this is Hong Kong ballet. It's a city ballet that you have to create that sense of Hong Kong pride. As a result, we decided to use all female dancer for the key visual and outdoor advertising in front of Cultural Center in Hong Kong. So here you see 5 female dancers stand in a very architectural pose up against iconic Hong Kong skyline. They are no longer need to be rescued by the prince or the men. Like we thought, okay, it's a really good image, first image to go out to show female empowerment. Ballet dancer for male dancer, they're very athletic. I love this image because it's portrayed male dancer, in a contemporary way. Imagine if you have 2 princes with the sword fighting. It's not going to have the same impact as this. So we want to encourage people to come to see the ballet and see the ballet a different way. And Subteam, by the way, he was changing all the choreograph to be much more Hong Kong-centric rather than the Western view of classical ballet. Ballet can be fun and whimsical, and this one we want to celebrate the culture of Hong Kong. If you've been to Hong Kong, they love food, they love Cantonese, dim sum, that's part of every family's on Sunday. I'm half Chinese, so my family always have a family lunch and brunch on Sunday. So this scene was shot on Hong Kong Harbor. This restaurant actually, it was a very cool restaurant called Jumbo Restaurant, and it got shut down after COVID. And what I love about photography is that it has ability to capture the moment in time. This restaurant is no longer there, so it was a little kind of, something special for me to be able to capture. And this one, we want to show the visual of young 20 years old Gen Z stand in front of 200 years old temple. Just play with juxtaposition. Symmetry is its best, and we want to use the repetition of the girl wearing bob hair with circular tutu in front of circular doorway. Something's very powerful and simple. And lastly, picture of In the Mood for Love. This is one of my favorite movies. Have you guys seen the film In the Mood for Love before? Yes, it's one of the best films. You have not, please check it out. But we do an interpretation of the movie. So we got a couple, having a dinner in the Cha Cha Tam restaurant. And it's beautiful interior design architecture, and we want to also preserve that. Into our surprise, we got a really well-received, press beyond just design and advertising, but also travel. CNN Travel run an article about how beautiful Hong Kong is, and then people start notice Hong Kong Ballet, that it's like cool organization that make Hong Kong cool. 6 months later, I got the text from my sister and then a friend of mine in Bangkok, and they say, have you seen this? So a company in mainland China, Little Swan, they create a new ad campaign inspired by our campaign. And of course, the whole female empowerment thing went right out the window. They decided to show the gender role of female of doing housework, laundry, and of course this whole campaign it's helped help the housewife buying the laundry machine. So guys, we have a long way to go when it, projecting the image of gender equality, especially in Asia. And 6 months later, Hong Kong Ballet celebrated 48th year anniversary of Hong Kong Ballet, right? And then we thought, we already done the photography campaign, let's do a film. We want people to feel the dance and really see how ballet can be joyful, and we want to represent the modern ballet of today. So we took a song, a classic song, Barello, and divided into 3 chapters. Classic Barello, and then hip-hop Barello, and then Chinese Barello. So let's take a look at the 40th anniversary film for Hong Kong Ballet. Thank you. So we make classic current again, and I'm happy to report that the subscription went up 150%, and now Hong Kong Ballet received the almost the most, but the second in terms of government funding in the art, because they see the impact of what we have done. What's so incredible about this for my team, if you guys remember, Hong Kong and China has a big dispute, and you see a lot of image coming out from Western press, Washington Post, New York Times, people are protesting, a lot of police brutality, it's just very negative image. But then Washington Post did an article about, how admit, the tagline say, amid upheaval, there's a good news in Hong Kong, it's ballet thrive. So we designer has ability and have a power to project positive image into the world. We can control and help really bring up positive image, to the world. It doesn't have to be all negative all the time. So guys, designer, we have a power. And we have more power. You have to think and really realize that you are more powerful than you think as a designer. Think about how can you use your creative passion to make an impact in society. And it doesn't have to be a big project. It can be something small, something from your street, something for your community. Everyone here can be a change maker, and we all have a point of view to give into this planet. I love this quote so much, and it's part of the different campaigns. Steve Jobs said, the people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Imagine if every one of us in this auditorium take one community project a year. What a better world we're gonna build together. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Pum. I knew that you'd be showing beautiful work, so I'm not going to show so much work. I'm going to apologize in advance. There are two things that happened. One is that I completely changed my presentation yesterday. So if it's a bit muddled and incoherent, that's why. And the other thing I'm going to apologize for is that my wife is making a rare appearance here tonight. Yay! And there's nothing more nerve-wracking than sitting in front of such a brilliant, talented woman. But anyway, here we go. So I am the creative chairperson at Accenture Song. Prior to that, I've been at Accenture for 2 years. Prior to that, I was a VP of Marcom at Apple. And then prior to that, I spent 17 years helping to build a small agency that became a big agency in New York City called RGA. And I think the thread that goes through all of those jobs, and even the jobs I had prior to coming to New York, was this, I started as a designer and then started to apply my design skills to different areas, including advertising like Pum, and more recently to technology. So, that's going to be a big theme of what I'm going to talk to you about. My presentation is called Deep Simplicity. You'll understand how those two words relate to each other as I go deep into this presentation. And I was asked to talk about designing for social impact, which is what Pum just did. And I think the important thing to understand about the impact that a designer can have is being a really good designer and applying that to a problem, which is, I think, what Pum just showed. And I think that the context of that has a lot to do with this compounding cycle that happens in the world, and we're going through one right now, one of these cycles, which is, humans shape machines, so culture creates technology, and then machines shape humans, and and we're seeing that the technology shapes the way that we live in the world and the culture, and this cycle keeps happening and keeps compounding on itself. And you need to understand that context before you understand what you need to do as a designer and affect that, right? And so if I was to pull right back and look at what that relationship between machines and humans has been, for the last few hundred years, and I would say there's three big sort of revolutions that are shaping the world and shaping designers' ability to affect that world. The first one is the Industrial Revolution. The second, Internet revolution, and I'm one of those people that think that this new thing called generative AI is going to be the next revolution, because I think it's going to rewire everything. And understanding these revolutions is understanding how they affect the world. So the Industrial Revolution gave us the ability through mass production to make everything. The Internet, through the network, helped us connect everything. And the interesting thing about generative AI, and I don't know how many of you here have played with the tools, but generative AI actually combines everything. It combines everything to create new things. Each of these things is very powerful, and each of these things, what comes with it is some good things and some bad things. And understanding these trade-offs, again, is what us designers need to think about, because as a designer, you want to maximize the good things and minimize the bad things, right? And if I look at these three revolutions, this is how I'd characterize the good things and the bad things, the trade-offs. What came out of the Industrial Revolution was enormous wealth, pulling millions and millions of people out of abject poverty. But with that came pollution, and we're obviously seeing the effects of that now. The internet has given the world access to things that, people access things they have never had access to before. And that's a wonderful and empowering thing. But it's also created chaos. When you connect everything in the world, it tends to create chaos, right? And so we're dealing with both of the positive and negative there. And as we enter the first part of the generative AI revolution, the good thing is creation. These technologies can actually create in ways that are sort of uncanny and magical, but there's a sort of opaqueness to this creation that leads to a lot of distrust. Distrust in personally, how did I get to this answer that I'm being given? And societally, what's going on, and what can I figure out? Where can I figure out what's true and what isn't? And so I'm going to show you three case studies, and this will be the only work I show you from my body of work that Accenture Song has done recently, right? And I think the thing to understand with these case studies is in each of these case studies, the design team is trying to solve for one of the things that are going wrong, and they're also often trying to solve for one of the things that are going wrong with one of these revolutions by using something that goes right with the next revolution, right? So the first example I have here is called Designed in Bangladesh, Made in Europe. And it's basically taking one of the bad things that came out of the Industrial Revolution, which is sort of uneven distribution of wealth and an imbalance between the wealthy global north that does the high-value jobs and the poorer global south that does the lower value jobs. And in this case, the high value was design and the lower value was the sort of labor and manufacturing. And in this case study, we created a Bangladeshi shoe brand, right? Because fashion is one of the most imbalanced places where this happens. And the Bangladeshi shoe brand designers came from Bangladesh, and then it was manufactured in Europe. So it sort of flipped this thing. So that, the bad externality that's coming out of the Industrial Revolution, which is, where the things are being made, is being solved in some ways by the good things about the Internet revolution, right? And so by enabling someone in Bangladesh to design, and then to connect that design with the rest of the world through e-commerce and the attention and PR is a good thing. The next one is a digital product that the team in Canada did, and this is something I actually didn't know a lot about, but this problem it's trying to solve is climate change, and it's solving climate change by doing something. Actually, President Biden has mentioned that he wants an initiative to plant 1 billion trees, and these sort of things are governments are talking about because trees help arrest climate change and create biodiversity. And so we created this tool because what I didn't know is that there's actually a global shortage of seeds, right? And so we created this digital product that connects the people that are planting the trees, right, which are people that are involved with reforestation and growing, often with governments, with people who can supply seeds. And what's interesting is that anyone can supply seeds. And so this is basically democratizing the supply side, which is collecting seeds, and then creating, and so again, we're solving for the Industrial Revolution with the connected internet, which is one of the good things about the internet revolution. And we're also adding to this parts of the new revolution, which is the artificial intelligence, by creating data around where these seeds come from, because where they come from matters, especially in a sort of dynamic climate change, of where you then plant them. So having a database that sort of correlates where the seed's from to where it gets planted is a really important initiative. Again, can only be done with the sort of the data that comes out of the revolution. So the last one I'm going to show you is called The First Digital Nation. And this one is, the context of this is that there is a low-lying country in the Pacific called Tuvalu that in decades is going to get swallowed up by the Pacific, thanks to rising water as a result of climate change. And the thing that happens when a country disappears is that they, by international law, you aren't a country unless you have a defined territory, right? And obviously, if a country disappears, then you lose all of your rights. Your citizens lose all their rights that comes with being a sovereign nation. And so this is a sort of urgent thing. And so we created a digital twin of Tuvalu, right, in the metaverse. You remember the metaverse. And the reason to do this is to preserve their nationhood, right? Because, if we can create a digital nation that can then get recognized by the international community, then the dignity of nationhood will remain with these people. And also, importantly, we preserve the cultural artifacts and the institutions of this small country. And so, again, this is an example of a problem coming out of the Industrial Revolution that's being solved by the latest version of a revolution, which is collecting spatial data and making a record for the future dignity of this country. Interestingly here, even though not a lot of people are on the metaverse, as you probably know, a lot of people read media, and so when we launched this at the United Nations Climate Conference, COP27, it got so much press and was such a symbolic resonance that 2.1 billion impressions were created around the world, which indirectly led to, I think it's up to 20 other countries that are recognizing the sovereignty of this digital nation. So it's moving the bar on that. So the point there is that that we have the good things and the bad things that come out of these revolutions, and sometimes you solve the bad things with a new revolution, and it's something that designers need to be thoughtful, and they have to leverage the latest technology to solve some of these problems. Now, if I was to pause now and talk about where we are now, so before we get to the oncoming AI revolution, the internet revolution is sort of matured quite a lot, and so this, the accessing is good, but the chaosing, what do I mean by that? Well, I call it the complexity tax, because when you connect complex systems, the biggest issue is not that you have all this information, all these connections, it's how do people access them? How do this and as it happens, people with the least resources are least able to access this because of what I call this complexity tax. So the tech utopians will breathlessly talk about all the great things and the promise of the internet. And a lot of these things all of these things have come true. We definitely have more time because we're cutting off time from mundane tasks that we had to do manually before. We'll be more connected. No, and that's good. I'm connected to my family, even though I'm here in New York. My family's back in Australia, and we'll have more control because we can use an app to do things that we had relied on all sorts of bureaucracies to do before. So we have more control over that. But it's also true that these things have created a certain amount of complexity because we might have more time, but we've also got more. We've got much more of everything. There's more stuff on the internet to consume than we have time to consume it. There's more interfaces on the internet than there are designers to make those interfaces clear. And yes, it's true we're more connected, but those connections have sometimes led to us being more tribal. And there are also lots of bad incentives that have crept into the internet, not just around the sort of model, the business models of a lot of the platforms, but also just bad actors using the internet to create disruption for their incentives, right? And so for me, the design principle for the internet revolution is this thing called deep simplicity. So what is it? So let me unpack a little bit. So what do I mean by deep, right, is a lot to do with going back to this relationship between machines and humans and this sort of symbiotic relationship between technology and culture. So the machine part of technology is very deep. What I mean by that is it's complex, and it gets more complex because these technologies keep layering on top of each other. But our ability to interact with those technologies has to be simple, right? Not everyone is an engineer at a big tech company. And so the deep bit is really about exploring the possibilities and the potentials of technologies. And a simplicity bit, which I think is an important bit culturally, which is how do you translate that potential of great technology so that people can use it? Well, you do it by distilling the experience because the complexity of the technology is not something that is easy for most people to use. So that's design's role, is to do that, right? And so when you go deep, you understand and build these amazing technologies. And as a designer, what your role is to translate that into something accessible and useful, right? And that by itself creates accessibility for a lot of communities that don't, because a lot of people that actually have resources, they still have middle people to help them. And so the promise of the internet is actually to democratize a lot of things, and the thing that's stopping that democratization is bad design, right? So if you want to be changing the world, be a good designer. Okay, so this relationship between machine and human is something that has been true for a long time, and the gap between the potential of a machine and a human being able to use that machine has been shrinking over time. I like to use this example, of how creative infiltrates technology. So this is how photography used to be done, right? So at the turn of the century, to make a photograph, you had to fix image onto a glass plate, and so you had to be a chemist. At the beginning of photography, there were no creative people, there were no artists. It wasn't even considered an art form. It was a technical accomplishment to do this, and you had to be a chemist. And so, this is where, at the beginning of every technology, this is true. Technicians are the ones exploring the potential of technology, but they do it in a way which is very technical. Now, of course, no one was thinking at this point in photography about composition, grading, all the things that turned photography into an art form. And it's interesting, actually, that when creatives get involved in this new technology, not only do they make it, once it's accessible to them, do they dignify the technology with sort of beauty, but they also create a new grammar. So the technicians make the ability to, the sort of technical ability, and creatives and designers actually do things that are much less expected. There's something relentlessly expected by the march of technology. It's very methodical, and this is why scientists in different parts of the world often come up with the same scientific conclusions at the same time without even knowing each other. It's because there is a sort of a logic about the mechanical world that's not true of culture. Culture is completely asymmetrical, completely weird. And so at the beginning of film, the technicians that were creating the film, they were using an old artistic grammar, which was theater. So this thing here is a woman dancing in front of, So everyone was very impressed with the parlor trick of a moving image on a wall. But they didn't really think about the artistic expression of that because the grammar was just using old grammar. And what happened is when artists got access and they created things like editing. Now editing, if I took someone from ancient Greece and put them in front of a modern film, they wouldn't understand it at all. Editing is completely abstract. Why do things appear and disappear, move around? What is this thing called a camera, right? And it's created, and this is my point, is that when creatives get hold of technology, they dignify it by creating something that no one expects, that's heartfelt and organic and interesting and not predictable, right? And so you need a process to do this, right? And if I think about, the internet revolution, that started with desktop being, the desktop interface being DOS. So this is a command line interface. The first people that use computers, this was how they accessed that technology with a command line. You probably don't, people in this room remember this, but I knew a few. And to get the most out of a computer, you had to know how to use this DOS interface, and so you had to be technical. So it was the amount of people that had access to this technology was the amount of people who could understand this sort of opaque interface. Now, of course, Apple, the company I work for, was hugely responsible for democratizing computing by creating the graphical user interface. And this is a screenshot from Photoshop 1. No layers, only one undo, so you had to sketch a little bit before you designed. But it changed my life, right? But anyway, the graphic user interface is a good example of that. Now, if you look at that and you compress it into a project, and this is something I learned at RGA, because we had great technologists, great designers, is that it becomes a dance between these two ways of thinking, right? So let's not wait. Let's put these things together, and then there's a process that I found out worked really well, and it's to think about the time a project takes in relationship to that bottom axis, and the top axis reflects how much knowledge you have about the problem, because the knowledge you have about the problem correlates with the complexity of understanding the technology. And so, there is a point at the beginning of every project where you need to understand the technology, the complexity, right? Before you can do anything with it. If you don't understand it, then your solution will be shallow, it won't be deep, right? And this is usually the domain of people that have great technical knowledge, and technical systematic thinkers they're very good at asking questions and seeing connections and building on it and understanding complexity. Now, what happens there is if you stop here and you revel in all the knowledge that you have of that complex system, then you end up designing really bad interfaces. So I'm going to give you an example. How many people have used Midjourney? So Midjourney, confusingly, is hosted on a platform called Discord. So that's already bloody confusing. And you create in a stream, which makes no sense because the sort of temporal nature of the stream means you're always chasing your work. Look at this interface. Now, I love this technology, and I figured out how to use it, but it shouldn't be so hard. And the reason it's so hard, and the reason people don't have access to this, is because technical people are not very good at subtracting. They're good at adding, right? And so this ability to ask questions and keep seeing connections, keep adding, at some point, you need to get people that are good at something else, which is subtracting. And stop asking questions, start making decisions, and stop subtracting until you get down to something simple. I learned this on the Nike Plus app, which was in 2005, one of the sort of breakthrough things that we did at RGA, where we had these amazing technical people coming up with these solutions, and the early versions before we actually managed to pull it down into simplicity were incredibly complex, showing a week's run as like a financial chart as opposed to something elegant and simple. And so that's what I mean when I talk about the process of deep simplicity, right? Which is that you get to simplicity by understanding the complexity, and then it's rich and deep. It's not superficial simplicity, it's deep simplicity. But you need to end in a human, simple way. But this involves people, right? So a team, to get to that, is sort of a metaphor. I use this metaphor of a brain. There's two sorts of people. You know, it's one of those things that people say. There's two sorts of people in the world, right? And in my experience, and as I've worked across different creative tribes, I've seen I can cleave the world in two sorts of people. And this is true for creatives and technicians, right? And at RGA, I created this structure around these teams, which I called stories and systems. And what I meant by that is that one side were people that process the world spatially, right? They were spatial thinkers, right? That's a systematic thinking. And the other side process the world through time, right? Which is temporal thinkers, right? And so they were more like storytellers, right? And they understood the power of the revealed moment. So the people that think about the world spatially and are creative spatially and look at the world spatially, they see connections always. They see connections and they process the world, everything all at once, right? And temporal thinkers, they process the world one at a time, and they're very good at understanding the power of the revealed moment. So one side creates the system, and the other side helps you path your way through the system, which is more of a temporal thing, right? And again, this is where deep simplicity comes in. So that front end of the process where you're exploring should be done by people that are systematic and process the world spatially. And the back end of the process should be done by people that are naturally subtractive because they understand the world as just a bunch of discrete points. So they have to think subtractively, right? And when you get that working really well, it's magic, but it only works at the intersection. And this is why the brain is such a good metaphor, because the brain is lateralized by this thing called a corpus callosum, which is right down the middle. So if I picked up someone's brain here and I pulled it apart, it would be connected by this thing called the corpus callosum. And that's the thing that creates the magic. Once that corpus callosum is severed, which they used to do to stop epileptic fits, your brain doesn't work anymore in a way. It goes to, and so if I look at that Discord, that Midjourney interface, it's been designed completely by one hemisphere of the brain. So the team to me is brain damaged because it hasn't been balanced out by the second half of the brain, and they're not working together in this conversation. So the top of that bell curve is where the connection happens and where there's a conversation between these two worlds and where you then come up with better stuff, right? So last week, I don't know how many of you were paying attention, but OpenAI launched or revealed ChatGPT 4o. O means omni, which is because one of the characteristics of this large language model is it pulls together all sorts of media types. It's multimodal, so there's image, there's text, there's video, there's all sorts of, it all comes together. And it's true to this sort of powerful synthetic nature of generative AI, right? Soon after, Google had their Google I/O, and they also announced a bunch of different upgrades. There is this arms race now between all the big platforms and some of the smaller large language models that is making generative AI move at such an incredible pace that the creative part of this team that I'm talking about, the creative part of the process, the designers are trying to catch up. And it's really important that we do, right? And so I thought to myself, and this is why I completely rewrote this deck, by the way. As I was watching this launch, I was thinking, does deep simplicity still apply? And interestingly, it does, but in a very different way. So if deep simplicity, as you know, that comes out of the internet revolution, is about clarifying an interface so people can use the technology underneath that interface, right? So you need to go deep to understand the machine and simple to translate it to be human. This sort of flips it. It's sort of inverted in a really interesting way, because I think what's going on here is that it's true that these machines can do things pretty amazingly, right, and simply, but something's getting lost with the human piece, right? And so, as I was saying with the previous case studies, you know, using the internet to solve things from the Industrial Revolution is true. And I can see here that the good part of generative AI is actually, in some ways, solving for the deep complexity I was talking about before, which is really opaque interfaces on top of complex systems. So the thing that happened, that because generative AI doesn't just connect things, it combines things, what it does is it makes that interaction very simple, because you don't have to do the work of connecting these complex systems. It comes back with an answer, a synthesized answer. You ask a question, it comes back with an answer. And this is true for diffusion models, which are images, and for text, you know, and for multimodal. It is that you ask a question and there's no friction. You don't have to navigate your way through an interface or an architecture. It does everything for you behind a closed, right? And so it is solving for that deep that complexity tax in a way. But it's not solving for something else, so if it solves for that, the new problem coming out of it is that if I'm interacting with something that is so frictionless and so, then I'm losing some of the depth of my humanity, right? Because what happens is that I'm not having to cognitively process the answers I'm getting back. I'm not having to learn as I create something, right? And so I'm having very shallow interactions, even though they're seamless and everything. And so I've been thinking about, so what's a designer's role now to humanize this thing? And so I came up with this yesterday, about 3 p.m., right? Which is, we need to, as designers, think about those moments in any experience that we're designing with these amazing technologies, right? And we've got to decide which piece is human and which piece is sort of mechanical, right? For the human pieces, we need to add texture to it, right? So instead of there are times when I need choices. There are times when I need to understand the process. There are times when I need to dream a little bit in my interactions. Sometimes my interactions need to be more than a desiccated answer. Sometimes it needs something deeper to dignify myself and for me to understand the world that I'm in. And then there's going to be plenty of things, right, where we're going to want to subtract friction from the mundane. So add texture to the humane, subtract friction from the mundane. We are still going to want to get simple things done. To get some things done simply because they're mundane, because they don't dignify us. But there are moments when we need to be dignified, and we need to. And that's a design. I'm doing a project right now, which is there's a diagnosis tool for a beauty company, where you put in some information about yourself, and it comes back, and then it takes that in and then gives you the right products for you, right? Using science and all that sort of stuff. And I was looking at what the designers, and it was too frictionless. When you put in all the information around yourself, it doesn't give you enough information back about who you are. So I'm having a conversation with someone who's not telling me who I am. And then when it was displaying products that were recommended based on those things, it wasn't displaying enough products. So I was losing the texture of shopping, of feeling like I have agency, that I can choose. So you can see here, as a designer, there's some discrete moments where everything around that can be really frictionless. But there are moments when I need to be human to actually enjoy it and understand it, right? And so another way of saying it is that, we need to know when to inspire the imagination and know when to make things invisible, right? So when do we make things immersive and when do we make them invisible? Sometimes we should make things invisible. Other times, and we need to pay attention as designers, we need to inspire and create imaginative moments, right? And so I think that's how you should design for social impact. I mean, I think you need to actually get in at the coalface of these issues, of where these revolutions are happening, and dignify these technologies with design and make them human. And one of the things that people get really worried about is that machines are going to be more like humans. I'm more worried about humans becoming more like machines. And so that's not going to happen if you do your bloody job as a designer. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick and Pum. We are going to have an extremely short Q&A right now because we're running a little over time, and we do have a little bit of a schedule that we have this evening for many of you here. I do want to reiterate, please do see this exhibit this evening. You can walk right in and start looking at it. But maybe we'll take one or two questions.
I was wondering how you both use AI in your design process now or in projects in general. Just how is it used maybe more for sketching purposes or later on in the process?
Is this working?
Yes.
All right. So how it's affected my process as a creative is that it used to be that I'd use these technologies to get an idea out of my head and into the world by crafting the thing that I want out in the world. And now, because the space between the idea and the realization of that idea has been collapsed into a prompt, the process is now more backfilled. It's not the skill from a process point of view isn't to hold that image in your head and sculpt it out of the technology. It's actually more about curation, about inspiration, curation, and editing, because I can get infinite, immediate, high-resolution realizations of that thing out of my head. And the danger there is that the time that you make up from not making it by just getting it created will be taken up with this swirl of infinite options. So I have to get used to that from a process point of view. But to me, that's a big difference from a process point of view, is that you front load the creation down to a nanosecond and then you open up back, which is where you apply taste, good decisions, discipline around editing and not getting in that big swirl.
But sometimes I use AI too. We actually did a campaign. Sometimes sometimes the AI takes me to the place that I didn't even think of. So, it can be
It's a great hallucination.
Quite surprise, but you end up spend so much time and waste a lot of time in mid-journey. But once you train it, can be quite amazing.
But no machine is ever going to have the taste of Pum.
Any other questions?
Thanks for the talks. Those were amazing. You mentioned texture, which in the second talk, which I would love to hear your thought, both of you, on this. I feel like in a very digital internet age, texture gets further and further removed. It's so much on screens and sounds and trying to augment what is real with that which is digital. And then you have AI in this new OpenAI app that's nothing but black and white blob moving around, and then some text, and maybe it talks to you. So I want to understand from both of you maybe, do you feel like in design more of the work, as time goes on and technology gets better, is in augmenting and actively adding texture to experiences? And is there some room, like we've seen these failed AI physical devices, because phones are actually really good, right? And they do that job really well. But how do we get more texture in design as time goes on with this tech?
So I think that's why designers need to be involved. Like in the sort of in some of these teams in Silicon Valley now, they don't have creative people involved in the creation of that. Now, when you get creative people involved, I think they just automatically add texture, right? And then sometimes the technology itself creates like you wouldn't have abstract expressionism without photography, right? You couldn't have imagined abstract expressionism without photography, because it doesn't make sense. Why would you do something that's non-representative if that's the role of painting, right? So I do think that and I remember since we're in the design thing, David Carson, I don't know how many of you remember David Carson. He's still alive, right? But David Carson, I think, came out of, he was a reaction, and he created texture out of the desktop revolution. Because what the desktop did when you were working in Quark Express is that the arduous task of putting a design into a grid was gone away. Like I was really good at putting things into a grid as a designer. And then all of a sudden I didn't have to do it anymore. And there was a time straight after desktop publishing with Quark Express where everything was like Swiss and really gridded because you could. And then David Carson said, well, fuck this. And he just added the texture to it. He just made it illegible and made it weird. The way you get texture is you get creative people. You put the tools in the hands of creative people.
And I think as a designer, you always have to continue to experiment, even with AI. I mean, the only way designer is going to grow is to keep experimenting and pushing the boundary. Otherwise, design won't grow, right? So whatever they throw at us in terms of new technology, for me, I'm trying not to be against anything. You just have to be the student of technology, student of culture at all time.
You're the design army. You'll take any weapon.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And there are more during the rest of the week, so hope to see you there. And thank you, Pum. Thank you, Nick. Great pleasure. Thank you.